I think this is obviously something that has developed over the last, I would say, probably 10, 15 years. So you now have a bunch of organizations, and I'll hold my hand up, I belong to one of them, who have a number of people who the vast majority of what they do is expert witness work. And that creates its own difficulties, and it's become a focus for commentary from certain sectors. So let me tell you a story first. So I heard this story when I was last out in Singapore, and told to me by a lawyer who basically had hired a surgeon to give evidence in a medical negligence case. And essentially what this guy did apparently was he phoned up a bunch of his friends a couple of weeks before he was due to go to a hearing, and he said to them, "Do you have anything in theatre next week?" And he then turned up in theatre to observe someone else doing a particular operation. Now, whilst he was given evidence, he was asked a question in cross-examination. When was the last time you were in theatre? That was the question. His response was, I was in theatre last week. Now, clearly his intent was to deceive. And a lot of what this particular individual was doing, apparently, was he was generating thousands of medical reports in personal injury claims across the year. And he'd written some algorithm that essentially he went and he saw whoever the individual was, did an examination, fed that information into a program that he had created, and that produced 70, 80% of his expert report. He was churning thousands of these things out a year. It became an industry. And it was a side industry. He was still practicing as a surgeon. And then he was given evidence. Now, that is an extreme example, which I, along with everybody else, I'm sure would condemn. What you have on the other side of that are large consultancies who have now brought together expertise under one roof, and you may be able to bring a delay expert alongside a quantum expert, alongside a technical expert, for instance, and integrate those expert reports against the same factual matrix. And that has certain advantages and benefits in terms of research and so on and such like. Now, some people think that's an incredibly bad thing. Whereas if you go and you read publications by, for instance, Professor Doug Jones, he actually thinks that's a good thing, because those individuals have to know that doing that properly, doing that ethically, doing that according to the rules and procedures of the tribunal that you're working in, that is key. You get that wrong, suddenly that all dissolves. Now, the question I would ask, and the bit that does concern me is, so as far as an expert is concerned, if the bulk of what they're doing is expert witness work, does that make them an expert in being an expert? And that has to be a concern. But the question I think that is more relevant is asking the right question, which is, when was the last time you actually practiced your primary profession? So when was the last time you actually did the thing that you are saying you are an expert about? I had an individual that came for accreditation who was a delay expert. And there were certain question marks that came out of his submissions, because he also happened to have a master's degree in computer programming. And a lot of the analysis that he did came out of something that he had designed. So a black box, in effect, that no one could access, no one had sight of what the algorithms were, what the outputs were. Whereas you could go and use a commercially available piece of software, such as Acumen Fuse or Primavera or something similar, that would do exactly the same analysis, but in an open format that was available to the expert opposite. So part of my concern was that you have this black box analysis and you're just asked to accept the outputs from something that you cannot test, that you have no sight of. And when the question was put to him, his response was, oh, nothing's changed in delay analysis in the last 35 years. And he hadn't practiced as a programmer, a planner for over 35 years. Everything has changed in delay analysis. You know, when you think that CPM was only becoming prevalent in construction in the 1970s, that was 50 years ago. Everything has changed. So experts who do not practice their profession, I think, is the real question. Experts who actually work within an environment that professionalizes expert witness work, I don't actually think is the issue.